What caused ships and planes to disappear without a trace? Why has aeronautical and navigational equipment stopped working or changed course by itself? Historical shipping records show that the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle are much older than many people realize. Ever since the earliest days of oceanic exploration, sailors have witnessed strange sights.
Really, the awareness of the Bermuda Triangle started with Christopher Columbus. Being such an esoteric navigator and a well-respected sailor, his log traversing to the New World is very accurate. And it turns out, just as Columbus got into the area known as the Bermuda Triangle, he recorded having compass malfunctions. The following night, he saw a large fireball hit the ocean.
He saw strange lights, he saw strange weather phenomena happening there. So it's definitely a case that the story of the Bermuda Triangle is not just some modern or some urban myth at the threshold of the 21st century. It is as old as there are accounts of people going into that area.
About 450 years after Columbus, on December 5, 1945, the U.S. military experienced the Bermuda Triangle's most perplexing mystery. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 U.S. Navy torpedo bombers flew from a naval base in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training exercise. But not long into the 2-hour mission, all 5 planes were suddenly gone. The mystery was compounded when the Navy sent out a rescue plane, and it too disappeared. 6 planes, all flown by skilled pilots, had vanished into oblivion.
That struck everybody as very odd. This was now the modern era. We have radar, we have radio. Still, 5 aircraft vanished.
Now the question is, where have all of them gone? It really is as if they have been snapped out of our reality into something else. And of course, what that something else is, that's the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle.
Over the years, few have lived to tell of any strange anomalies that have occurred to them in the Bermuda Triangle. But American pilot Bruce Gernon is an exception. In 1970, Gernon, his father, and a business associate were flying from the Bahamas to Florida when Gernon reported seeing a strange cloud directly out in front of their plane. Then, as he approached, Gernon claims the cloud formed a donut-shaped hole, or vortex.
The tunnel was huge at first, but then it started getting smaller rapidly. And when I penetrated into the tunnel, an incredible thing happened. These lines instantly formed. It was like looking down a rifle barrel because the lines were swirling slowly counterclockwise. I encountered some intense electricity. There were like flashes going on and off. And all I could see was this strange, grayish, yellowish fog. I call it electronic fog. I noticed that my instruments were malfunctioning, and at the same time, I'm feeling this unbelievable sensation.
Gernon says when he finally exited the tunnel, he radioed Miami Air Traffic Control, but they couldn't find his plane on their radar screen.
And then, about 3 minutes later, the radar controller came back on the radio, and he's all excited. He had identified me over Miami, and I couldn't believe it because I'd only been flying for 33 minutes. It should have been more like an hour and 3 minutes.
Could such a discrepancy in time and location really happen? And could extraterrestrials be using this kind of gateway to travel to Earth? According to Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity, it is possible.
Through Einstein's principles of being able to bend space using a gravitational pull, it's very possible that extraterrestrial craft could somehow get a higher charge of energy from these locations like the Bermuda Triangle, which allow them to do a burst of energy, if you will, a warp speed, and harness some type of extra particles or energies from these locations to get them where they're trying to go.
Cal State Fullerton, 2013. Here, in a small lab at this public university, physicist Jim Woodward conducts experiments that he believes will one day change the way we travel through space.
I was primarily interested in trying to figure out how to make stuff go fast. And to do that, you need to master the problem of propulsion. To master the problem of propulsion to achieve speeds that are a significant fraction of the speed of light, you have to be able to manipulate inertia. And so that's how I got interested in gravity and inertia. What I found is that it may indeed be possible to get around space-time quickly.
Dr. Woodward's work seeks to prove a controversial theory known as Mach's principle, which says that there is a direct relationship between the motion of mass here on Earth and that of distant matter that exists throughout the universe. Woodward theorizes that if this proves true, it could be the key to unlocking stargate travel. The idea was first introduced in 1883 by Austrian physicist Ernst Mach.
Mach's principle, at the simplest level, is the assertion that when you push on an object, the reason why it pushes back on you is because of the gravitational action of the most distant matter in the universe acting through the object. And so the matter out there, far, far away, is the stuff that determines the inertial properties of objects locally.
Mach's principle basically says that all the stars, all the planets, all the galaxies out there do in fact have an effect on us here. And the reason they do is because of the way they warp space-time. So even though you may not see it, the world around you is determined by what's going on potentially light years away from you.
Dr. Woodward's initial interest in Mach's principle was not to create wormholes, but to revolutionize space travel by creating propulsion without expelling matter from the craft.
Our standard way of thinking of propulsion is we send stuff out the back of something. So you have a rocket, it sends hot gases out the back. You have a jet engine, it sucks air in from the front and shoots it out the back. So almost all of our propulsion systems are that basic principle. Throw something out the back, you move forward. The Mach principle, almost think about it maybe as a surf wave, right? You're riding along on the wave, and that's moving you forward. You don't actually have to send anything out back. In this sort of effect, the idea is essentially to create a wave in space that you move forward on.
But Dr. Woodward discovered that Mach's principle could have implications beyond just propulsion. He believes it holds the key to actually creating traversable wormholes, giving us the ability to travel to the most remote corners of the universe. The experiments suggest that if scientists could somehow separate or decouple ordinary mass from the influence of this distant matter, huge amounts of negative energy could potentially be exposed.
In principle, you should be able to engineer devices that will enable you to screen matter from the influence of gravity of distant matter in the universe, and if you can do that, you can make stargates.
While the existence of Mach's principle is still debated in the scientific community, Dr. Woodward believes his experiments prove its validity. By running electricity through a stack of lead zirconium titanate crystals, known as PZTs, Woodward accelerates and temporarily changes the rest mass of the device he calls the Mach effect thruster. If Mach's principle holds true, when the mass of the Mach thruster fluctuates, it will interact with the distant matter in the universe, resulting in a small amount of measurable thrust.
All of this is happening through a gravitational connection between this local device and the rest of the matter in the universe. We have the Mach effect thruster here, mounted in the Faraday cage, and it's located on the end of the beam, like so. The reason why you put the thrust balance in a vacuum chamber is because you're trying to detect exceedingly small thrusts on the order of a micronewton. This display is of data taken over a period of 1 day. The red trace is thrust. The dark blue trace is the power being delivered to the device. This is the clearest evidence for the Mach effect. This large thrust transient when the center frequency is turned on, followed by a thrust transient when it is turned off. None of that thrust should be there if there aren't any Mach effects.
Washington, D.C. The National Institute of Health. Here, in 1990, scientists began the Human Genome Project to identify every gene in the human body and determine what makes up our DNA. This scientific breakthrough may allow us to manipulate human evolution and alter the human race. But is it possible, when we have become masters of human evolution, that we may finally understand the true nature of gray aliens?
When you look at the physiology of what we think the grays are, okay, large head, huge wraparound eyes, spindly body, you have to ask yourself, does this make sense in an evolutionary sense? And the answer is no, but does it make sense if these beings are bioengineered? And the answer to that is yes. That's what the grays really, I think, most realistically are.
I believe that extraterrestrials found on this planet a species that they were able to change the genetic code that would allow them to interact and secure the longevity of their species. We're the product of that. We're the genetic carrier, if you will. One of the reasons why they're still abducting us. That tweaking of the genetic code is still going on. The Greys are our space brothers. I don't think they're necessarily evil. We're an ends to a means.
Could extraterrestrials have bred with humans? You sort of need two things to have happened. One is the life form would have had to be carbon-based like us, presumably, because the chemistry has to work. The second thing is you would need basically the same genetic type structure. So you could imagine if there was another planet with fairly similar conditions that gave carbon-based life forms, what would evolve, there is a good likelihood that you would get species like us. And if they were close enough, then of course they could interbreed with humans on Earth.
Why would they be creating a hybrid being? Is there something that's going to happen here on Earth where our genetic makeup maybe won't be able to survive some type of solar activity or something that needs to genetically modify us so that we can still survive? Is it for our own good as humans, or are they doing it for their need as aliens?
If gray aliens interbred with humans, might their biology and appearance be a reflection of their more advanced evolution as a species? And if so, might they provide a hint of what humans may look like in the distant future?
Even though the greys kind of look very different to us, you know, the larger heads, the smaller bodies, the big black eyes, in terms of evolution, you need hands, you need fingers and thumbs, you need eyes, you need ears, you need a mouth, you need to be able to communicate, because you would need that type of form to really advance yourself as a civilization.
When you're a super technologically advanced race, you don't really need big muscles. You don't really need sex organs if you're being genetically engineered, biologically and cybernetically, most likely, to function in the capacity that they do here. A super large head, for example, houses a hell of a large brain, easily their greatest asset. It's a brain that allows them to have a cognitive capacity probably vastly beyond what we're able to have. It's a brain that allows them, most likely, to have telepathic capabilities that are beyond the capability of most humans.
I tend to subscribe to the theory that we are in their image. Sounds like the book of Genesis, doesn't it? But it's very possible that ETs, who look like we do, or should I say we look like they do, came here, did a little manipulation, genetically altered what was here on the planet, and created the Adam and Eve, turned it into modern man, and then left for whatever reason.
There is a missing link. The missing link is ET. They've changed our genetic code eons ago, and through a process of evolution, you have the human development to the point where we're going into space. Our evolutionary process is a direct result of genetic manipulation by ET.
But could an alien species, such as the Greys, really travel to Earth from a star system hundreds, or perhaps thousands of light years away? Or might the Greys actually be time travelers from our own future, as some ancient astronaut theorists suggest?
I think what we have is a whole shift in the imagination in the 20th and 21st century. Alien Greys are actually beings from the future who are traveling in time to the present time, which is their past. And they have evolved into this strange, hairless, grayish, bug-eyed form.
I have to wonder if they're actually interdimensional. I say this because the evidence suggests they have the ability to fold space and time with their technology.
Once we're talking about interdimensional beings, and what we're finding is that today, ancient history and future, I think, are all the same. That also explains why there are so many time anomalies happening with these events.
So it's very possible that they actually come from a distant part of our future.